Hey, welcome to another episode of the Jonathan Project Podcast, where iron is sharpening iron. And our purpose is to help men navigate the complexities of the world around them. And we take the biblical example between Jonathan and David, their friendship and loyalty, as our inspiration for this show. If you want Jason and me to come on out to one of your events, it could be a men's event, business, church, please reach out to us at thejonathanprojectpodcast at gmail.com. Again, thejonathanprojectpodcast at gmail.com. Good morning, Jason from the frigid lands of Alabama. How are you doing?
It is absolutely cold. I've got my Mr. Rogers sweater on.
That's right. Welcome to the neighborhood.
Yeah, let me tell you, it is nothing but a sheet of ice out there this morning. Man, and it's been a glorious morning. How's yours been? And then I'll tell you some funnies.
It's going well. It's not cold here, and as you can imagine, in Florida, or at least my part of Florida, it's not too chilly.
But you guys are participating in winter this year, so
we are. We did sign up. Someone signed Florida up for winter. I don't know who it was, but you got your drunk winter on my front lawn. Please come pick it up. It got down to about 30 degrees, 39, 38. Degrees a couple times in the morning this week when you're rolling out trying to get the kids to school, off to work. So for us, I mean that's cold. And then the high only got up to maybe 50.
Oh wow,
a couple days. So anyways, we signed up for something like winter, but I'm ready for it to kind of move on.
Well, it's definitely down in the teens, and as you know, this has brought about some chicken drama. Yeah. So long story short, I called you. I was at work. I'll tell this to everybody, because this is part of being a dad, right?
Yeah.
So I get the phone call and I get all these pictures, and it is of a bloody hen, and I'm like, what's going on? And so it's, my wife has grown attached to these animals as well as my daughter. And the rooster has decided to attack this one hen. And he kind of picks on her from time to time. So he decided at that point, he self-elected to be a Starland Nav candidate. So, because I can't have him killing. The hens have a job. Like, they produce eggs.
Yeah.
And for all you guys that are debating about getting chickens, those eggs are great, but it is a trap. I need you to think about Admiral Akbar going, it's a trap, because your spouse will they'll be pets, right?
Yeah.
Well, he goes. I put him in a box. I'm like, good luck, candidate number 2. Good luck. Figure it out. So that night, it was a little bit of an emotional moment, as people have grown attached to this. 2 other people in the family have grown attached. My son has not. And he's like, so of course he's like, hey, you ain't got to worry about that thing. It's in the belly of some coyote right now. He's agging it on. And I'm like, shut up, son. This is not the time.
Yeah.
So, next morning, what am I doing? Driving slow by that side of the road where I put him out.
I remember that. You were looking for the old
box. I'm like,
it's still out there on the course somewhere, or at this point, it's a frozen drumstick.
Or he froze, or he advanced to the hand-to-hand portion with the coyote. That's where he is. So everybody goes through it, right?
Yes, we do. It's funny. It leads us right into our first episode here, topic on season 4, suffering. How does everyone handle suffering? And as a believer, really, how should we handle suffering? What do you think?
No, it's we're all going to go through these valleys, right? And I think about the people out there on your prayer request right now. They're going through these valleys. Everybody has prayer requests. And we have more prayer requests than we have praise quite often, right? It's the way it is. And I looked at, you and I have been talking a lot about Job.
Yeah.
I like the story of Job. Job has an ending. It goes on for quite a while. It's like almost 40 something chapters, 42 chapters. And that's how it feels sometimes. Like, it goes on. When I was reading the book of Job and reading over it last night, Job doesn't come on the scene until verse 13. Like, there's a whole prequel conversation that's going on. And I don't know how many people noticed that, but that was kind of like a big highlight to me. Like, we don't
Yeah,
know what's really going on behind the scenes.
exactly. But we have to be careful. And I think a lot of times, like what I took out of, as we talked about what we were going to do for this topic for the week, it's easy to make the assumption that, oh, you're suffering because of something, right? Or, this is how God deals with suffering. Well, that's not the central theme. The central theme is God is sovereign, and we don't get the full message sometimes, right? And I don't even know out of the story of Job, and it's never kind of revealed to us. Did Job even know, like, hey man, this is how it come down the pipe?
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, Satan and God are having this conversation, and he's, and God calls Job up to bat. And, Job's a righteous man. He says, have you seen Job? And Satan, in front of everybody, says he's only good to you. He only loves you because you give him something. Think about that relationship. We've all been in relationships where they're one-sided. They're transactional, right? You only like me because you're, doing something for me.
Right.
It's kind of like those chickens. I like them because they give me eggs. Now my wife likes them because she likes them, right? Two different sides here. But that's Satan's call out. Is he goes, he only likes you because you're so good to him. Look at how rich he is. Look at how everything is.
Yeah.
In front of all the angels, in front of everybody. And at that point, God tells him, says, you then take it. But he leaves him his life, his wife, and his friends. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Think about that. A man's wife has direct access to his heart. She's going to say something, and she's there all the time.
Yeah.
And then his friends show up as kind of that layering piece of it. Job.
And you bring up a good point, and I think for the audience, it's such a relatable book. It's one that it's talked about. It doesn't matter the circles. Job is, in my opinion, probably the best example of dealing with suffering from a Christian perspective that we have. And it's something that all of us can relate to. We've all gone through various seasons of what we would call suffering, right?
Yeah.
I think about just like, this past 2 years, and we talked about this, like the transition from being an army officer into being a civilian has been, there's no other way to say it. It's been a long walk through a dark valley. It's been a lot of suffering, a lot of questioning and understanding why, where's all this going, right? And that's tame compared to, I know some things that folks go through, loss of a loved one, a child, or, I think about those folks in California.
Oh, man.
Irregardless of what, some folks, and I've seen people be absolutely nasty on social media with comments about people. Irregardless of how you feel, you can't lump everyone in a state in together or anything.
Yeah.
People lost their homes, and there's been people that lost their lives. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of things in humanity that are collective and universal, and suffering is one of them. But there is a way to approach it. And I think that over the course of those 42 chapters with Job, we get to see that. We get to see an example of how to handle the uncertainty and the chaos that life can bring, and still find and strengthen your faith and trust and belief in God, which I think that's hard for a lot of people, man. Pain is one of those things that drives people away from the faith.
Yeah. Look, people are like sponges. I said it the last time or a couple times ago. Whatever's in you comes out when the pressure comes on.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it really does. When emotions are high, things come out when you're under pressure. And Job, so let's, for people who aren't familiar with the story, or you are, but let's go over this. He lost all of his oxen. People descended and took it. Then the next one was a fire from heaven that destroyed all the sheep and all the people. And then people descended again and took the camels and killed everybody. And then there was a great wind, and his sons and daughters were killed. Right? And it was, the Bible records it, while one man was speaking and telling him the bad news, another set of bad news came on. And it went from destruction at the hand of man to, the elements, and so forth and so forth. And Job makes something pretty profound. He says, the Lord gave and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It rains on everybody's crops. It does. Some crops get flooded, and some crops get the moisture that they need. It's the way it is. But of all those people, Job's wife, he left her, right? So as wives, you think about it, and what does his wife come out and say to him? She's like, go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, you're gonna highlight it, but yeah, she was not very positive. But I'll let you fill in exactly how that wasn't a positive statement.
No, she was like, "Hey, what you need to do is go ahead and curse God and die." I mean, that's some advice. Yeah, honey, we're gonna make it through this. Why don't you just curse God and die? Maybe you're the problem.
And that's probably a whole subject we don't get. Like, Mrs. Job's, we don't even get her name, Mrs. Job's suffering and pain, and again, it's how people respond to it. I think in that moment she had absolutely lost her faith, but, there's no doubt.
Sure. She had suffered the loss of her entire stability, right?
Yeah.
What she viewed as stable. And she also had lost her children.
Yeah.
Those are massive things.
Yeah.
And we don't know. And that I think what's important, we always go, look at the fires that occur. Why did God let this happen? Why did God let that happen? But in reality, Satan's the prince of this world, and it shows what Satan used right here.
Yeah.
Right? He used the fire. He used the wind. Don't forget that when Jesus went to cross the boat, the sea rose up against him. Like Satan, you know what I mean? Like the elements rose up against him. And I love that story because he gets up after the disciples are like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to drown." And he gets up, and it's in the Baptist faith, or, in the evangelical, we always have peace be still, and it shows his hand up like this. But in reality, he was like, yelled at it. Kind of like you do your dog to get off the couch. Get off the couch.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoop, like glass.
Yeah.
Right? But you see here who's using what elements for destruction.
Yeah.
But then his friends show up, and they were on the right path. Colby.
They started out well. I'll say that.
7 days of silence. They just sat there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is a good thing sometimes.
Hey, man, when your buddy's going through it, just being there.
Yeah.
Like, you got an explanation for that? No. I mean, just look at the worst circumstances. Literally, your ox got killed. That guy can't even catch his breath. Oh, by the way, this happened. Oh, by the way, this happened. Another guy comes running up. The only survivors come running up about the same time.
Yeah.
And, we have friends. We all do, right? And sometimes they show up and sometimes they're helpful, like that closed-in box wrench. They're there, right? And sometimes they're helpful like a set of swimming cleats. Stop being helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. But it's again the humanness of the Job story and talking about that, that universal utility and purpose behind suffering. Even the most well-meaning people, and it's often the closest people when we're going through something, they don't necessarily bring the best perspective. And really, as a believer, or what I would encourage non-believers as they go on a journey to try to find and understand who Jesus Christ is, it's the moment where you lean in and you discover who God really is in the midst of suffering. Because and I think it's important to put in frame correctly, because so many people out there are hurt and they're angry at God for something that's happened. Yes, he can use suffering as a tool, right? And you get elements of that in Job, where he's refining him, because even Job had some, suppositions about what God was, and you get into this questioning and Q&A with God. But I think as human beings, we do the same thing sometimes. If I become a Christian, then it's going to be a life of bonbons and just easy going. Well, that's not what the Bible shows us. Jesus, suffered, and he goes so far as you have to take up your cross, which we talked about in the last episode of season 3. So, understanding that storms come sometimes because this world, whether you want to believe it or not, there is an adversary out there that just comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And
Mm-hmm.
then the really hard one is sometimes, yes, sometimes the choices that we make, right, lead us into, some storms. They lead us into a season of suffering. And then third, sometimes it's just God trying to take some rough edges off of us so you can be used, so you can actually reach your purpose. And for some of us out there, if we were honest, right, some of us are just kind of stubborn, hard-headed, and it takes a little bit of some suffering and pain to get our attention.
I resemble that.
So suffering is something that happens past, present, or future. But I think, without a doubt, the Bible, the story of Job, as you peel back the very complex layers of it, it gives you scripture, gives you hope, and equips you to be able to deal with pain and suffering that comes. Because here's the anchoring kind of verse. Acts 14:22 tells us that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God. So the Bible doesn't paint a picture that it's going to be sunshine and roses. I think too much emphasis has been on the joy and praise and blessings, and not realizing that, yeah, that's great, and you'll get those, but sometimes you're going to have to walk through the refining fire that God offers to get to the other side.
No, I agree with you. I like what you had to say, and I looked at Job's friends, right? He has 3 friends that show up, and they sat there for 7 days. And then Eliphaz goes, he asked this question. So one of them's Eliphaz. So he shows up, and he says, hey, has a righteous person ever suffered? Because when we suffer, when we go through something, everybody wants to know why, right? We not only do we want to know why, but psychologically, we want to know why other people suffer, because we feel like if we can identify it, we can stay safe.
Yes.
So Eliphaz introduces this thought that there's got to be something hidden, right? But the Bible records Job as getting up, making sacrifices for his kids, always being that intercessor and so forth. And he plants that seed that, hey, maybe you're right. And maybe this is a mistake, or there's something hidden. So he plants that seed for Job to begin to search this out. And I love that when he says, as a righteous person ever suffered. Well, Jesus did. The apostles did. The prophets did. Let's be candid. Ezekiel, who's got a book in the Bible, cooked over poop because God asked him to. Hosea married a prostitute. That's a churched up way of saying he married a hooker. Okay? Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
All right. But he claimed spiritual insight. And I thought that was interesting because in James, it talks about spiritual insight. And when, just like you said about the people going through the fires right now, people get pretty vicious on social media. Yeah, congratulations, you took a sucker punch. And I don't view that as courageous, helpful, or anything of any redeeming character.
No.
Everybody likes to be that smart aleck sitting in the back of the room that cast out that opinion. Oh, I'm going to get some laughs. When in reality, if you were saying it in person, you might get popped in the mouth. I like that instant feedback sometimes. I think more people, not, you know what I mean? Like, you probably should have had that growing up when your parents probably should have put their handprint across your cheek. But, it talks about that, and it says that wisdom from above should be pure, peaceable, gentle, and full of mercy. Right?
Yeah.
Like Eliphaz, he goes into this, and then, he's got his other buddy, Bildad, and he goes, the righteous don't perish. Look at times of past. He's trying to cast his wisdom in there. If those are their comments, they probably should have got up and left.
Yeah.
And Zophar begins to speak, and they get into it. And all this time, and I thought about why did Satan leave them? Because they were a target too. They were friends. They showed up. They had to be good enough friends to sit there in silence for 7 days, sleeping on the ground.
Right.
Go ahead.
Another thing behind that is we think about, you talked about, and it's a good point to understand from a suffering kind of perspective. Why were the friends left? Well, again, what is the strategy that we've talked about so many times on the show is Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was trying to completely dismantle Job's life. And one of the biggest things for us as people, and the whole thing with the Jonathan Project, is that iron sharpening iron. You had men coming, like we said up front, being that iron. I'm sitting there with you. I can't imagine in that scenario as a friend. What can I say at this point? There's nothing I can say. You've lost your livelihood, you've lost your health, you lost your children. So let me just sit here and be here with you. But then, like you said, you turn it and you twist it, and Satan gets in and starts like, okay, well, let me destroy this friendship. Let me destroy this last bastion of hope that you have with your friends by them saying some stuff that I don't know if it was malicious or not, but they're trying to, like you say, figure it out. And so I think it's one of these things when you're going through something, is pointing your heart towards a source that can actually give you the answers that you need. And that's the Bible, to be quite honest. Like, there's no better place to turn to when the world gets upside down and chaotic than that small, gentle, quiet voice that says, hey, I'm still here with you and I'm going to get you through.
Yeah, no, because the debate between him and his friends goes back to the righteous don't suffer.
Yeah, which is wrong.
Which is wrong, right? Like, they do. And then it comes into Job taking the stance of, man, I haven't done anything. So he's defending himself to them.
Yeah.
And in his defense of it, if you kind of tear it apart and look at it, he's saying, if I could debate, if I could just tell God, if I could present my case to God, I haven't done anything wrong. Okay. So God made a mistake. And that's not true. He didn't make a mistake. He's you're there and you're going through it. And God didn't make a mistake, and it's tough, and you may not get answers. Job has a lot of questions throughout this whole thing. And it's interesting. So this fourth friend shows up, Elihu, right? Elihu. I don't know how you pronounce it, but he slides in there. And it's interesting because it's always about the three friends, but then there's this other guy that's, and he's all the way in there, and it says he gets angry. He gets angry because Job keeps telling about his righteousness. And he keeps going, because everybody's quit talking to him. They've said, well, Job, you're righteous in your own eyes. We're just not going to say anything anymore. We're not offering anything. Well, they probably should have stopped talking a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they were trying in the same token. But it's, I can kind of look at it. But there's Elihu, whatever. And he goes, it's God is righteous. Well, and even right before that, or somewhere around in there, Job tells him, he says, I believe in my Redeemer. My Redeemer is what he's leaning it all on. I've got to flip through here to find it. But he talks about his Redeemer. His Redeemer lives in 1923. Oh, it's way before it. Talks about his Redeemer. And he keeps putting his faith in his Redeemer. And there is some talking there. But what I really do love is when God shows up. God shows up to Job. How would you like to have a personal conversation with God where God speaks back? A lot of people go, man, I'd love to have that. Let's lead off with God's opening statement. Gird yourself up like a man. Let's see it.
Yeah.
And which Job is like, maybe I should have shut up, right?
I bit off a little bit more than I can chew here. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody seems like they got questions for God, but everywhere I read in the Bible, when God shows up, people just lay flat on their face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
Usually.
No. Moses had that. That's not me. And it literally says, gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. In other words, you got questions? Oh, I got questions. Mine are going to be answered first. And God goes through a series of 60-something questions, for Job. And those questions, Colby, when you look at it, you can bucket them into two things. There is a God, right? That's number one. There is a God. He says, hey, look, did you do any of this? And then the second part of those questions, or really the statement is I'm not him. I'm not him. Job, you're not God. I'm not God.
Yeah.
You're listening to this. You're not God. Colby, I know you're not God. You and I talk all the time. You know I'm not, right?
Yeah. No, far from it.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's, God comes on the scene and he tells him that. Job didn't even get the book to read, right? He didn't get the book
No,
of Job. He was
he
going
just
through
lived
it.
it. Yeah, he
Yeah,
just
he's
lived
living it.
through it. Yeah.
Yeah. The days of TiVo or whatever that is, where you can record it and fast forward it, or
Yeah.
Netflix, you can just kind of go straight through the series. Yeah, that's kind of ruined us.
No, you bring up a lot of good points. As I've been sitting here thinking about it, is there's a couple good points to kind of just take away because I feel like it's such a big thing on my heart. Like, and most of the people that I've encountered where I've had discussions on, well, how can you be a Christian when there's children at St. Jude's, or how can you be a Christian when that woman was just crossing the street and she was 9 months pregnant and got hit by a car, or how can you be a Christian when there's famine, right? There is a longing in the human heart to reconcile when we see absolute violence and terrible things happen to quote unquote good people, right? Here's the honest answer, folks. Even after reading the book of Job, we don't get all of the insight into why God had that conversation with Satan, why he allowed the bounds of things to happen. But what we get is that he's in control. Like Jason said, he shows up, you know? And what you can take away and pull out of that is, suffering is a form of battle. It's really a form of will. Are you going to cave and give into the will of your flesh or the world around you and say, you know what, God was all these bad things, and we dismiss all of the good things that are happening, you look at where we're called as friends and the example of what we should be as friends when someone's going through it, because suffering happens in a community, or at least it should. The Bible says in Galatians 6:2, we're to bear one another's burdens. So there's a point there. Suffering is preparing us to go through this life for the future glory. It should create a longing, of anything, that there's something better to come. It's like, while your guest room is not always the most comfortable room in your house, like, yeah, I want you to come and visit, but I don't want you to live here. God is also taking suffering and saying, you know what? I get it. You like going to get ice cream because that's one of my favorite things to do. But I don't want you to get so comfortable with this that this is all you want to do. There's more to it. And that's hard. I get that. I completely can sympathize with that's not sufficient. You can't sit here and tell me when I lost my child that, oh, this is going to work out for the good. But I can. There's no person, there's no counselor, there's no friend. And we see this from Job. And this is my point. And all those people, even his spouse, they all failed him. And it created an ultimate dependence on God. That suffering drove Job to God. And that's important to understand. Suffering is complex. Let's just be honest.
It is. Cole, you said something, and I think it's extremely fair. When I read this, I didn't come out with, why does God let bad things happen to good people? What I came out with was, we're all bad, right? Like, we all are, except for the grace of God. And that's been a maturing part of my life over this past year, is that when I really look at myself and apart, it's, why does God let any good thing happen to me? Right? Period. I've lived long enough, and I'm not a fool to go that I've known me at all of my life, right? I'm not going to get into heaven. I'm not going to be righteous of my own works. And it doesn't matter right now how good I am. I still carry with me my history.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's the totality of what I've done with this life. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, I no, you summed up everything well. I just think that, like I said, my heart is always sensitive to that, for the non-believer out there, and you deal with this topic of suffering, which is, again, it is a truth of humanity. All of us, past, present, and future, have suffered, will suffer, are suffering, right? But I walk away from the story of Job, and I would encourage everybody to read it, is that, Job discovered at the end of the chapter, right, or the end of the book, Job 42, 2-6, that God is omnipotent, mean he's all knowing, he's all powerful, he's sovereign, and he reveals his holiness to him. And his ways, as hard and complex as that is to understand, and I can't sit here and grasp it, are not ours. But that doesn't mean that your suffering goes to waste. And I think about something that you say often, like humans are static. You know what? And suffering forces us to move in one direction or another. You can't go through a suffering period and not be unchanged, right? And ultimately, we're not robots. If you want to subscribe to and live a life that's governed by Christianity and that worldview, then you're going to go through some storms in life. But God always gives you a choice. And if you stay with him and keep walking, even though it's raining on you and you're getting drugged down and things are not going right, he will make it right, in his own way, shape, and form.
You highlighted a couple of things. There's actually 2 points. Let me do this one first. So in chapter 42, verse 7, I think that's relevant. And if you decide, hey, I'm going to read the book of Job, I almost wish this was up front, but you need to know this up front. God comes on and he calls out Eliphaz the Temanite. He calls him out. He says, you know what? I'm angry at you. He says, my anger is kindled against you, or my wrath is, and against your 2 friends, for you've not spoken the things that is right, as my servant Job said. So when those guys come on, understand all 3 of those, they're not doing right.
Yeah.
When we are his friends and we have friends that go through it, it is, you got to be careful how you do it. How are you representing God? And that's important. One, I would never want God to go, yeah, my wrath's kindled against you. I don't think that's something I need assigned to me, and it'd be a kind of a scary time. But you put this like, hey, we're going through this storm. Now, if we were all out walking, and I think back to the times in my life where I've been walking with a rucksack on, and when it starts raining, it gets heavier, right? It just does. And it gets miserable. Things start binding, and next thing you know, you've got, or the straps are making your shoulders raw or whatever, right? But here's the deal. A good friend who comes along beside you in those moments has to remind you that there is a dry spot waiting. I have no idea. Oh, there you are. It just cut out here. It went totally white. But okay. So when you're walking, a guy comes beside you, you have to focus on there's a dry spot waiting, right? Like the end is there. You can't just stop when it's cold and wet. Like a real friend doesn't get you to go, well, let's sit here and debate about the clouds. Man, if this high pressure system or whatever, or if you'd have packed it better or whatever. Now they may help you repack it, but that's not it. Let's focus on what's coming. And you hit something. So Job, he lost his kids. And I can't imagine that, right? Like, and there's people that go through that, and I don't know if they ever get over those moments.
Yeah.
The only comfort that I could ever hope is that when David and Bathsheba had the child, and you said it, we talked about it last time, and I think it's absolutely worth remembering, is that David wept to the point he laid on his face and he cried and cried and cried and cried. And then when the baby was lost, right, when the baby died, they were afraid to go tell him. Now, this is a man who's killed a lot of folks. Matter of fact, he's known for slaying giants. None of us are known for that. And he did it with a rock. So let's just lay that out there. And then he cut that dude's head off. So they're afraid to go tell him. And then David stands up and he goes, okay. And they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Has he developed, the Sybil syndrome? Has he got a split personality? No. David says it very plainly, and it's recorded in Scripture. He goes, where that child is, I cannot go right now. Or, that child can't come to me, but where he is, I'll go one day, and I'm going to be with him. And if you suffer loss that is at that degree right now, just know that God has a plan in your life, and he's provided a path so that dry spot at the end of this storm is that reunion with those that you love, and they're there, right? And be there. Go there with them. Don't, I got it. We all got emotions, but let's control those things, and let's wrestle with them and get that under submission. But that dry spot at the end is that reunion, and that may be it, right? Like heaven may be the ultimate dry. It is the ultimate dry spot.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. No, that's a good way to put a bow on it, is because we see that with Job. He was restored in all facets of his life, but he had to walk through the storm. And so I just encourage people to remember that is whatever you're going through, lean into God and he'll get you to that dry spot. So that is yet another episode of the Jonathan Project Podcast. You can find this episode and every episode coming out every Tuesday morning on your favorite platforms. That could be a Apple, that could be Spotify, that could be iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. You name it, we're probably there. So please subscribe, follow us. We put the website where you can find all these platforms and our comments. If you would like me and Jason to come on out to one of your men's events, speak to young men, young moms, single moms, older moms, dads, everyone, please reach out to us at thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thejonathanprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Jason,
awesome.
Thanks for your time this morning. I hope you guys stay warm.
I appreciate it. Oh, I did mean to say hi to Tucker and Lauren, both friends of my children who listen to the podcast. I wasn't tracking that. So
hello, Tucker and Lauren. Thank you for being avid listeners.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you here in a bit. See you.
All right. Bye.